Welcome to Renegading. It was the Scottish author Charles Mackay who spotted that human beings go mad in crowds and come to their senses slowly and individually. One place to see this madness in action is in financial markets, especially when those markets have been juiced with cheap money. But manias never last, so on the cusp of the next economic crisis, some people are waking up to the reality of how the world really works. In fact, daily, more and more people have stopped drinking the Kool-Aid and have started joining the dots. Their mission is simple: to understand how far the tentacles of the vested interests really reach to maintain the status quo.
One of the things on this show that we're really interested in is a personal story.
Yeah.
You've been through one.
Mm-hmm.
You're a real estate agent in Vegas.
Yeah.
You oversaw the crash,
Yeah.
and you had a light bulb moment.
Yeah, I did.
Walk us through it.
2007, March, going on vacation. Last thing my buddy said to me was, you should take this book and read it. Confessions of an Economic Hitman by John Perkins. I think you'll like it.
Holiday reading.
Yeah, it was a scuba diving trip, and I remember being on the boat, reading the book. We had 3 dives a day, and there were times when I was underwater diving and thinking, I can't wait till I get up to the surface so I can read another chapter. It was that
Perkins
impactful.
could put that on the front of his book, though, couldn't it? Better than a scuba diving trip.
I mean, I seriously was. It was so amazing to me because as I'm reading this and I'm understanding what he went through in the 60s and 70s with Maine and these companies and how they enslaved Ecuador. We've got this great plan. Hydroelectric power plant. It's going to generate all this money. Your kids are going to have electricity. They'll learn to read and all these things. And they give some, a lot of money to the guys at the top. And then it doesn't pencil out, right? As it wasn't expected to, according to the IMF and the World Bank. And then they come over like a bunch of loan sharks to Ecuador and say, you owe us a bunch of money and you can't pay it, but I think we have a solution. Why don't you vote our way in a UN resolution, or you privatize your lumber industry and let our friends buy it, or you put an American base there. We can work around it. And I thought, oh my God, these guys are just gangsters. They're gangsters in suits. And to have that light bulb moment and see that it was this extending credit to people, in John's case, countries that couldn't afford it, and then getting them in a bind, and then taking back tangible assets. I thought, I'm living this. It's happening right now.
Right, and when did you make the link then between an economic hitman like John Perkins going around the world enslaving countries with debt and what you were doing on a day-to-day basis in Las Vegas?
It hit me when I was selling new homes. So I wasn't a traditional real estate agent. I was working for a builder in a fixed position. And a guy came in, wanted to buy a house. And when we ran his credit, he was approved for it, even though his job was that he was a landscaper. He cut grass and trimmed trees. He made about $10 an hour. And he was going to buy a $405,000 house, and we approved him for it.
And was that a moment when you thought, this guy on this salary isn't ever going to be able to honour this debt?
Yeah.
Actually, this is exactly the same as a developing country taking on a huge loan from...
Yeah, exactly. And I thought, this guy has no business buying this house. He can't afford it. But in his mind, they approved me for it. They wouldn't approve me if I couldn't afford it, right? So I must be able to afford it. Or maybe he could. Maybe he could just barely make the payments, but he couldn't afford anything else.
Because house prices are always going up, and actually he can luck out because he'll be able to flip it at some of the...
Exactly. The worst case scenario is he buys this house for $400,000. He realizes 2 years from now he really can't make this payment, and so he sells it for $500,000, goes back and buys a different house, pockets $100,000.
Which you can't really blame him for, can you? Because if you're on a suppressed minimum wage or a suppressed wage, and somebody offers you credit, and free money after it, another $100,000, what are you going to say?
You're going to say most people in this country have made their fortunes in real estate, and I'm getting started, and I'm going to do the same thing. It's going to start with this house. It's going to be worth a lot more. I'll sell it, or I'll keep it. I'll have a great house as things accelerate. And also, I was coming from Southern California, and the prices in Southern California were 3 times what they were in Las Vegas.
So you thought the Vegas prices could get there?
For sure, because there were so many similarities. And first, a lot of people from Southern California were coming because of taxes and lower prices, and Las Vegas is a great place, no state income tax, there's all of these things. So I'm drinking the Kool-Aid because I feel the same way. I actually believe it. I wasn't lying. I believed what I was saying. I bought my house, I bought a second house. This was gonna work for me too. Even if it stalled out and the house prices were not as valuable as Los Angeles.
Still he's bettered his lot.
You're still better off.
So back to our landscaper. So the penny drop was, this guy's never going to be able to honour the debt. What's happening at the micro level is also happening at the nation state macro level. Actually, there's a systemic problem here.
Yeah. And who's going to get that house in the end? The banks. You take it back from this poor guy. And that's what they did. They took him back and then they stuffed renters in there after the crash. I saw this happening. I felt, oh my God, I mean, did I do this to this poor guy? Well, I understand the psychology of it. I mean, he was just trying to get ahead, and he was given opportunities. And he was a guy that had come from Mexico, and he was given these opportunities. He was saying, "I'm finally part of America. You know, I'm going to get this house. I'm going to live the American dream." It turned into a nightmare. And it wasn't his fault. He was just part of it. I mean, as I'm reading John Perkins' book, I had that epiphany like he did, which was, I think I'm on the wrong team. I think I'm on the wrong side here. But it wasn't really that I was on the side of anything evil. I just was being manipulated, well, like we all were, with these inflated home prices and the unsustainable levels of debt, and then adjustable rate mortgages and things like that, where they never really explained it. I had an interesting situation happen to me when I was buying my own house. When I first got there, I used the lender that was our in-house lender to buy my house. He said,
No conflict of interest there?
No, we were free to use him. I said, I want to do a 30-year fixed mortgage. And he said, you should probably do a 5-year adjustable mortgage. I said, well, I don't really want that. I want a 30-year. And he says, you should do a 5-year adjustable. You're not going to stay in the house that long. The rates are low. And I said, no, I want to do a 30-year. And he said, well, you really should do a 5. I said, I'm telling you, I want a 30-year fixed mortgage.
Why was he pushing the others? So
well, what I found out later was that his commission was triple for that. I worked with him. He was my friend. And he was still trying to push me into this. I don't know that he knew it was necessarily going to blow up, but he had 3 times more money at stake if I took that adjustable rate mortgage.
So when you said that you realised at that moment that you were on the wrong side, as it were, but you weren't actively trying to be on that side, is it the case that there is structurally determined behaviour, like the guy triple the commission, that are pushing people through these routes because that is how this economy, the American economy, the developed West, however you want to define it, that's how those economies are configured?
Yeah. And if I had been in his situation, I might have done the same thing.
Right.
Because
so they're not bad people in these, you know, because often, and of course, conspiracy theory comes out at this point because it isn't that that there were people in caves with cats stroking them, you know, deliberately being evil.
Right.
But they are pushed into these structures because ultimately that's how we have, as a race of people, decided to order our economics.
Yeah, and also there's the mentality of if I'm not doing it, someone else will. But I didn't think it was anything wrong.
That's the ultimate arms dealer excuse, isn't it?
Of course.
If I don't do it, someone else will do it.
Right.
And they wouldn't do it as well, so I might as well do it.
Right, but that's also the philosophy when you look at the mainstream corporate media. Someone like Anderson Cooper, and you go, how dare he do that? Well, if Anderson Cooper grew a conscience overnight and decided to hand in his resignation,
someone else would fill that spot.
There's 100 people waiting in line to take that job.
Right.
So where do you draw the line for your own soul? If you know that you're a part of the problem and you continue to do it, then shame on you. But in my situation, I got to a point where I realized that it wasn't my fault, but I was part of a game that was rigged. I was determined that it would never happen to me again. I would never be put in a position where my actions were affecting other people in a negative sense. I wanted to understand a little bit more about cycles. I was in my early 30s when this was happening, and so I didn't know enough to, I thought I did, but I really didn't know enough about how the cycles work and the pump and dump philosophy and the scam and how it's been around for a while. And I said, you know what? My number one goal was that I wasn't going to get fooled again by this. I had got caught in the dot-com bubble with stocks going up and coming down. In real estate, there was an oil peak in 2007 that happened too. I had friends that were working in the oil industry.
You'd basically had enough being duped.
Yeah, I did. Right. I was done being a sucker. I was done being the guy, playing three-card Monte and going, how is this working? So I wanted to walk around the table and say, all right, explain to me how these scams are working.
But it was a conscious decision from you to redraw your cognitive map.
Yeah.
Because you'd been duped.
Because I was financially hurt, I was emotionally destroyed by it, and other people that were close to me were hurt as well. And I just didn't want that to ever happen again. So my way to make sure that never happened was to educate myself as best as I could on how the world really works, who's pulling the strings, who is manipulating things, what is their end goal. And if you can figure out what the goal is and work backwards, you might be able to save yourself some pain and torment from this. And so that's what I set about trying to do.
And what do you identify as the end goal of these people who are pulling the string?
They want to take us back to a situation where the kings and the serfs, where the few control the many, out of fear, physical control, educational control, financial control, military control. As an American, you have 9/11, and Afghanistan happens, and then 2003, you've got the yellow cake uranium, weapons of mass destruction, all of those, and you realize, these lies that these politicians tell, they tell them fairly easily. They have direct consequences. We're talking about millions of people dying. And so when I wrote the book, my feeling was, I think I want to bring in the voices of these people. I want you to read what they said. I want you to hear that Madeleine Albright, when asked about whether or not the sanctions on Iraq was worth it, even 500,000 children died, I want you to read that her answer was, we think it's worth it.
We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And you know, is the price worth it?
I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it.
Those are the words of a psychopath. And these are the people that are running your country, running this world. And people forget about that. And so to me, it was important to bring in the voices, not mine. My voice is in there, of course. My opinion's in there, plus my dark sense of humor. You know, Jon Stewart at The Daily Show did a really good job of mixing the real news in with a bit of humor so that you're laughing at the story, but at the same time you're understanding, oh wait, this is a real story too. So I thought that was an interesting way of delivering some bad news. And so that's where my sense of humor came into this, but just these, like I said, 500 different people hearing what they had to say, the Bushes talking about, you know, oh, there's a new world order. Oh, stop with the new world order. Well, what if you heard George Bush mention it 200 times, the first George Bush? What if you heard all of these presidents talking about this? Would it make sense? Would you be less dismissive of it if you heard that, you know, you've got Tony Blair and Madeleine Albright and Angela Merkel and all these people talking about the push for the new world order? Would that maybe wake you up to the fact that this isn't just some conspiracy theory, but actually there is a plan in place to bring this about, and call it what you want, but they believe in it. And so that was the point of this. It's like, forget me, take me out of it. Listen to them. They're telling you the plan. You just have to listen. And oh, I've never heard that. I never heard David Rockefeller thank the media for being silent and allowing the plan for the New World Order to take place and thanking them for 40 years of keeping their mouth shut. Well, he said it in 1991 at the Bilderberg conference. I've got the quote from it. This is what he said. He thanked them. Now, do you think the media is on your side? Maybe the media is working in conjunction with these people. Maybe the fact that you're not getting the truth on your nightly news. Well, I like these guys. I like Rachel Maddow. Really? You like Rachel Maddow? Did you know she said this, this, and this? You know, so I thought it was important to hear it from them because so much of that gets lost. It doesn't wind up on our nightly news. You're never going to hear about what David Rockefeller said or Hillary Clinton. Every now and then we'll get a little cackling, you know, we came, we saw, he died, that sort of thing.
We came, we saw, he died.
But for the most part, the media works to camouflage that from the public about the true intentions and the true personalities of these people. There's some dark people running the show. And I know that that sounds a bit conspiratorial, but conspiracy is just two people working in concert to commit a crime. And I'd say that that happens on a daily basis all over the world. You don't have to put on your tinfoil hat to understand that that happens. But so I just thought that if people could read it and hear their words, it would have a much bigger impact than just me saying it.
Welcome back to Renegade Inc., the show that allows us to think differently. Before we talk more about the levers of global control with the author, Charlie Robinson, let's have a look at what you've been tweeting about in this week's Renegade Inc. Index. Well, first up, we've got a tweet from the brilliantly named Belsaw Endgame and Is Morning. Who knows what that's all about? The tweet reads, as much as I want to not care, US imperialism affects the marginalized abroad. Venezuelans are buying and willingly eating rotten meat due to the shortage of resources directly caused by US sanctions, while simultaneously funding terrorists within the country.
That's our specialty.
Oh, really?
In the United States. Yeah, of course. Well, we impose sanctions on a country like Venezuela. When that doesn't do enough to convince them to sell us oil at the prices that we want, then we fund a competitor, in this case, Guaido, to come in and challenge to become the new president. And when that doesn't work, my fear is that he's gone as far as he can go as his useful existence, and that the next logical step is for the CIA to assassinate him and pin it on Maduro, to then justify an invasion and regime change in Venezuela. It's dirty tricks, but that's Elliot Abrams and John Bolton in a nutshell.
Next, from Freedom of the Net. In a concerning development, US visa applications now require 5 years of social media details, providing authorities with easier access to personal information. Incredibly Orwellian, this. And is it the case that you might have years ago put something online which is then used against you to leverage the position that, for instance, the US government wants to take against you?
Yeah.
I mean, wow. Orwell would be delighted with this.
Yeah. Well, and it also creates a society of self-censorship too.
Right.
Knowing
So
that
it's
going
thought,
forward.
it's thought control.
It's the thought police. This is memory holing you out of the system. It's sending a message to anyone thinking of speaking out in the future. This is what happens. You want to get on that airplane and go on your vacation? Better watch what you say. It's chilling, for sure, and nothing good can come from this.
Next, from Economawalk for Safe Technology, US is getting on China re-surveillance. Distraction technique. US surveillance is not far behind in surveilling citizens without permission or transparency. This is from a CNBC article. US takes aim at Chinese surveillance as the trade war becomes a tech war.
Well, the social credit system is coming. I would say that China is the test market for it. It works so well there, they're going to import that to the United States. I think people that are seeing what's happening with the restrictions on who can participate in these platforms is the next logical step is to assign you a credit score and then suppress it. If you're a good citizen, you get high scores, you're allowed to do things. If you're a bad citizen, like in China, you're not allowed to get on a train.
Next, from DS with US mainstream media, this consolidated, it is dangerously easy to mislead and deceive the masses. Here's a graph. In 1983, 90% of the media was owned by 50 companies, and today it is owned by a staggering 6.
The eventual goal, of course, is to have one. And you hear Eric Schmidt from Google talk about, every time you get 1 million answers to your Google query, that's a bug, that he thinks that there should just be one answer. Well, that's dangerous when you get one answer, because who's in charge of the answer?
And finally, from Nomi Prinz, the appointment of the next New York Fed president is the most powerful appointment in America that Donald Trump doesn't control, said Marcus Stanley, policy director of Americans for Financial Reform. My question to you as an American, when it comes to central banking, does the average American know how central banks really operate?
No, they don't know how they work, and that's intentional. They don't want people to know. In fact, that's why they named it the Federal Reserve. It's not federal, and it has no reserves. It's intentionally deceptive to make you think that it is a government-run institution. It's not. It's a private bank. And Americans don't understand how their normal banking system works. They don't even think about central banking. They don't understand it. They're so bogged down in their day-to-day lives that the concept of banking just seems boring and unimportant to them. When, of course, it is probably the most dangerous aspect of anything that I cover in the book is the banking system.
It brings us nicely to your book. It's our book of the week, Charlie. It's The Octopus of Global Control. Yeah. You've got 40 seconds to pitch it, so we all run out and buy a copy.
The logo itself came from the NRO, National Reconnaissance Office satellite that was launched into space with the same octopus, and it said, "Nothing is beyond our reach." A very chilling way to look at the spy satellite programs that are being launched. I took that. I thought that was a good cover for it. This is a book that you send to your friends, family members that don't quite understand what's going on, that maybe look at you a little funny when you start to talk to them about the way the world works. It's something that you can send. If you've gone down that path with them and they've said, you're out of your mind, send them the book. It's funny, it's got quotes that'll keep them hanging in there for a while, but it'll get the message across.
There it is, Octopus of Global Control. Congratulations on it. And if
Thank
you
you.
want the scales to fall away, it's well worth the read. So thinking about the book, the first question really about it is why sit down and write 500 pages? Because, I mean, any sane human being wouldn't sit down and think, you know what, I'm going to put... Because it's hard work banging out 500
Well, had I known how hard it was, I wouldn't have done it in the first place.
The worst sentence a human being can ever offer up, I'm going to write a book.
Oh, yeah. That's also part of the reason why I kept it completely within myself.
Yeah,
and didn't
that's
talk about
really
that.
interesting because you've actually got a similarity there with John Perkins with Confessions of an Economic Hitman. He didn't tell a soul that he was writing that book.
Right.
Nobody, only him. But you did, and you didn't know he did this, but you did the same thing.
I did. I wrote it in complete secrecy. I didn't want a couple things. First of all, I didn't know that I would finish it. I thought I was motivated to write it. I wanted to see how I felt. The more I wrote, the more I wanted to write. I snuck out of bed in the middle of the night to write this. The first person to find out about it was my wife. When the first box of books arrived, she opened it up, took a look at that book, saw my picture on the back, and told me, get out.
But why wouldn't you tell her?
I didn't tell anybody. I wanted it to be entirely within my control. I didn't want exterior influences. I didn't want somebody to tell me to stop also. It was that important to me. I felt this need, and I didn't know that if I could verbalize that to somebody else in my life and say, this is important, I have to write this.
And what's your intent behind it? What's your real intent behind this?
Part of my intent is to cleanse myself of any guilt that I had for being a part of this early on. Although I know it wasn't intentional, I did play a role in it. I felt bad about that. I wanted to make sure that this information went out, that people, maybe they wouldn't experience the same thing. Maybe they would understand this banking fraud. They would see it coming in advance because they had read the book.
So we're basically reading your big confession.
Yeah, I felt an obligation. I felt a duty. It wasn't pleasurable to write it, but knowing that the information was going to be out there and it couldn't be silenced after I put it out, the genie was out of the bottle. I felt that I had to do it. I wanted to do it, and that it was important. It wasn't. I didn't write a kid's book. It was something that was.
And the scope is huge. I mean, congratulations on the breadth: military control, government control, covert control, media control, spiritual control, financial control, and it goes on. Scientific control. What you're asserting is actually this octopus is in all aspects of our lives.
It is. And there's a quote in there from John Francis Hyland, who was the mayor of New York City. He's talking about the octopus with its sprawling tentacles. And he says, let me be clear, this octopus is the Standard Oil interest in their interest above. And he's talking about how they have infected the courthouses and the governments and the media and everything. At the very end, you read that was written in 1922. You read that quote today, you would have thought this was some guy from last week talking about it. And you realize it's almost a century. Nothing's changed.
But so the cynic would say to you, yeah, but come on, why are you doing this, Charlie? I mean, this is conditions normal. This is how we roll. This is actually how the world works.
Yeah, well, the world is broken. That's no excuse for us to sit and do nothing, to let the people that have turned this world into, you see people starving in Yemen. Were we just supposed to allow these psychopaths to continue on? No, we have to acknowledge what they're doing. Even if it's difficult, we have to do what we can to stand up and have a voice and say, we're done with this. This control grid that you've implemented, we had no say in it. We don't agree to it. We do not consent to this. And it's important to empower people to realize that the most important thing we can say is that we're not participating in this any longer. We're going to take ourselves out of this equation. You want us to vote? What, are we going to vote for Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump? No, this system is broken. The more people become aware of this, that's how things get changed. And things change. They always change. And the big lie that we're sold is that we're just one little person. We can't do anything about it. But that's not true. We can do something. We might not be able to change it all, but we can maybe impact people close to us. Start with your family. Start with your friends. Educate them as much as you can and take it from there, because those people tell a couple more people. And if John Perkins hadn't written his book, I wouldn't have written mine.
I have a 1.5-year-old grandson. And every time I look at this baby, I wonder what the world's going to be like in 6 decades when he's my age. And I know that if we stay the course, it'll be ugly. But we have this opportunity to do something very, very different. And one of the things we must recognize is that my grandson can't possibly hope to inherit a sustainable, just, and peaceful world unless every child growing up in Botswana and Bolivia and Indonesia has that same opportunity. And this is brand new in history. We live on a very, very tiny planet, and we're just beginning to recognize that we're all totally interconnected. Today, we're all facing climate change. We're all facing overpopulation, diminishing resources, increasing prices for food and fuels, violence that comes out of desperation. We're all seeing that the systems all over this planet are in rapid decline, and it's declining at an accelerating rate. And every human being on this planet, in fact, every life form, is faced by the same crises. And for the first time, we're all communicating with each other through the cell phones and the internet. Everybody is communicating with everybody else. So we've suddenly become this very, very tiny planet. It's a good thing that's happening in many respects. And it also lets us know in no uncertain terms that my grandson cannot have a good world unless every child growing up on every remote corner of this planet has that same expectation, and we realize it for all of them.
Your final chapter is So What Now?
Yeah.
And that's the obvious question for me to ask.
Yeah, part of it is the understanding that we have another choice, and that is to not comply with these unjust laws and these unjust rules. They want to put you in the military and ship you off to some foreign country to kill people that had nothing to do with you. Don't participate. Don't join the military for that. That's insane. You watch your nightly news and they tell you about how horrible. Turn it off. turn on something else, find another outlet. It's very instrumental for the people that are in a position of power to convince everybody else that they have no power. That's the greatest trick of all. But you have to wake up to that. People go bankrupt, slowly, then all at once. So it's a slow process, and then all at once. So we watch that with social media. Social media has realized, people are waking up. We can't have that. So they're trying to silence any dissenting voices. It's a dangerous thing, but it's also an acknowledgement that we're on the right track.
So if people do wake up slowly and then all at once, and this is an impossible question, where is the Western world, if you like, on that trajectory? Are we at a moment where people are saying, do you know what, I can see how the world is ordered at the moment and I don't like it?
Yeah.
Or are people just thinking, well, you know what can I do about it?
There's an inverted curve. The curve going up is an understanding and a realization that what we're being told is not the truth. And there's another curve that's going down, and that is the intentional dumbing down of society.
And where do those two curves cross?
Well,
and what happens?
Well, if the people don't wake up soon enough, it's over, because everyone will be too dumbed down to do anything about it. The trick is alerting people to the reality of the situation, educating them to get them going on that upward swing as fast as they can, because we're close to the point of no return. And the movie Idiocracy, it's set 500 years in the future, people have joked that now that's becoming a documentary. And that's, of course, alarming to most people.
And as you go around it on speaking tour or signing books or whatever it might be, what do you see? Is it a cause for optimism, or should we all run for the woods?
No, it is a cause for optimism. Like I said, with the social media deplatforming, you're seeing people that are having an impact, whether they're anti-war or anti-vaccine or anti-whatever, their voices are being silenced because the people in control understand that they're making an impact. They're legitimately concerned about these renegades getting out there and talking about things and the possibility that they might wake up the population. And that's the one thing that they fear, is that there's so few of them and so many of us. We have the numbers. It's just a matter of a sense of awareness and coming to terms with the reality. And it's very difficult for people to acknowledge that they've been lied to, that they've been deceived. And we don't like to admit that. None of us do. But we've got to get over that and say, well, that was in the past. And from now on, we're not taking this anymore.
Charlie Robinson, thank you very much for the book, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
That's it from Renegade Inc. HQ this week. You can drop the team a mail, studio@renegadeinc.com, or you can tweet us @Renegade Inc. Join us next week for more insight from those people who are thinking differently. But until then, stay curious.